If you're talking about it, I'll be talking about it. Dennis Prager here. Join me this morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Dan and Amy, well, Howard Schultz, the chairman of Starbucks, who stepped down this week, was on CNBC talking about his company, talking about the American economy, talking about his possible political aspirations, a lot of rumors that he may be interested in running as a Democratic candidate for president in 2020. Here's what Howard Schultz had to say about his party.
I will say that it concerns me that so many voices within the Democratic Party are going so far to the left. And I ask myself, how are we going to pay for all these things in terms of things like single payer or people espousing the fact that the government is going to give everyone a job? I don't think that's realistic. And I think we've got to get away from all of these falsehoods and start talking about the truth and not false promises.
I'll tell you what, it's not something I say a lot, but I agree with Howard Schultz about that, and I have the same concern, except it's that the Republican Party is going too far to the left. And a specific example of this at present, and by the Republican Party, that starts with well, I'm talking about the national level. That starts with President Trump. One example of this is this trade war that is in its infancy and may not fully metastasize, but is uncomfortable right now. And Larry Kudlow, as great a guy as he is, doesn't seem like he's getting the best of the Peter Navarro, Robert Lighthizer, and Wilbur Ross troika in the White House. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Steve Moore, CNN chief economist and Wall Street Journal columnist. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, guys. Good morning.
Good morning. So what about the developments since the imposition of the tariffs on steel and aluminum on Mexico and Canada last week? And now we get Canada responding in part and Mexico responding yesterday with $3 billion in tax increases on American goods.
Yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts here. I mean, first of all, Larry Kudlow is fighting the good fight here, but he is outnumbered over in this White House. And my line to the president, I talked to him a few weeks ago about this, is, look, everything is going so well with the U.S. economy right now. I don't know if you guys saw the lead story in the Wall Street Journal this morning that for the first time in 40 years, there are more jobs than there are people to fill them in America, which is an amazingly good problem to have. But, the economy is just firing in all cylinders. We have a surplus of jobs. We have, the economy is growing at 4.5% now, which is amazing. That in 8 years, Obama never got us there. So, why upset this apple cart with tariffs? It's one thing if we were losing jobs, but we have more jobs than we can handle, and it's very predictable that some of these other countries would retaliate. You're seeing that with the EU, as you just mentioned, Canada as well. Incidentally, I know you up there in those northern states are very worried about Canada. All these goods coming in from Canada. But the truth is, we actually have we don't have a trade deficit with Canada. The NAFTA has worked very well. And so I'm very frustrated by this. This will be a tax on American consumers, as Milton Friedman taught us. Dan and Amy, you guys know this. Remember this one? Tariffs are taxes. And so American consumers will pay more.
Well, so just one follow-up to that. So what about the idea that Kudlow communicated yesterday that of negotiating separate trade arrangements with Mexico and Canada rather than doing this with the two countries, or the three countries, including us, combined as a quicker way to get to a deal?
Well, look, I'm a huge fan of NAFTA. I think NAFTA has been, there's been some problems with NAFTA, no question, and you do need to, you need to modernize it after 25 years, but it's been good for the entire continent. And when you think about the next 25 years ahead, it's really going to be, what continent is going to be the world superpower? Will it be Europe? Will it be Asia? Or will it be North America? And, we have so much in common with Canada and Mexico that it's really preposterous to try to blow that thing up. And I hope that doesn't happen. By the way, I would make one other point, which is, I've said this before on your show. I do think China is a big problem. I think China is moving in the wrong direction. They're moving away from freedom. They are becoming more communist again. There's more state-owned ownership ownership of their companies. They are cheating. They are stealing. They are saber-rattling in terms of building their military, arming the North Koreans. I mean, there's nothing to like about what's happening in China these days. And so we should be very tough with them. But if you're going to, one of the lessons of history is you don't want to fight a four-front war. If we're going to get tough with China, we need Germany, we need Canada, we need Japan, and these other countries on our side.
Yeah, but they're not going to be on our side if we set these.
Them.
But, right, we did. We just antagonized. So why not just have the tariff war with China and leave Germany, leave Mexico, Canada, our allies out of this?
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that.
Okay, talk to your best man, Larry Kudlow.
Well, that's the thing. That's what we've been advising, Trump to do exactly that. And that it's probably.
Hello? Oh, did you step into a
no,
hole? Was it the question?
I think Trump.
I believe is now
there he
the
is.
enemy,
He's back.
which is, and it's just not a very smart strategy. Now, I will say this: I do think that this, we're talking about, the third inning of a baseball game, and this is all, with everything with Trump. As I've said many times on the show, you have to understand it's all about the art of the deal. And he's putting these threats of tariffs out there as a way to get leverage with these other countries to reduce their tariffs. And by the way, if he can pull that off, it will be a benefit to everybody. And he does have a point, Dan and Amy, that virtually every other country has higher tariffs on American goods than we have on the goods that come into this country.
Well, yeah, but as you know, that's hardly an argument. So they're punishing their consumers, so we should punish ours, right? That doesn't make any sense.
Okay. But look, you're making an argument, Dan, for sort of unilateral free trade. We should just open our markets to anybody who wants to sell stuff here. And look, Milton Friedman would be in agreement with you on that. But I would, I'm not so sure there's a political consensus for that right now. I mean, I think when you look at China in particular, I mean, it's extremely difficult for American businessmen and women to penetrate the China market. And then you have to give up your technologies, you have to give up your patents, and you're competing against state-owned enterprises. It's just not a level playing field. I think Trump has a point there. And look, I know, Dan, your heart is palpitating. You think I'm not a free trader anymore. I am for free trade, but it's hard to have free trade when all these other countries, especially China, are keeping our goods out.
Well, Facebook has been able to penetrate the Chinese market, apparently, and illicitly so, including giving private access to user data to a telecom company in China that was flagged by American intelligence agencies as a national security threat. Facebook is, and some of our social media giants, sort of problematic. And I wonder how you respond to some of the concerns that have been leveled from D.C. politicians about, Google searches where Nazism comes up when you Google the California Republican Party, and Twitter censoring, quote unquote, censoring Drudge, and some of this information about Facebook user data access to both device makers as well as foreign countries. Is this something that is the proper province of the federal government? Devin Nunes has hinted at more federal hearings on the topic. Is that something that you think is appropriate?
Yeah, I do think it's a problem. And, it gets to the point I was making earlier, Dan, which is, China is becoming a more closed society. I mean, we have 30 years of China moving towards freedom, both political freedom and economic freedom. It's amazing. If you want to see the virtues of free markets over, communism, socialism, Bernie Sandersism, whatever you want to call it. Look at what happened in China in the 1980s, 90s, and the last decade. I mean, China grew and grew and grew, one of the great miracles of history. But for the last 6 or 7 years, they've been moving in the wrong direction. You're seeing instead of privatization, you're seeing socialization of their industries. You are seeing more and more political repression there. And, infringements on, they're censoring things like Facebook and others. That's a big problem. I mean, I do worry that China may be going back in the direction of the Soviet Union, not marching down the freedom, road that we all hoped that they would.
Well, then, speaking of China, what do you think about this Reuters report on a preliminary deal with the Chinese telecom giant ZTE? They pay $1 billion in fines for, stealing American technology, plus $400 million more in escrow to cover future violations. And apparently, According to Trump trade advisors, China is offering to import another $70 billion of American goods if America helps to prop up their telecom giant ZTE.
Well, the ZTE thing was a disaster. I think Trump made a big misplay there. ZTE is a bad company. It has been stealing our technologies and so on, and they deserve the kind of penalties. By the way, it was Trump who imposed the penalties in the first place on ZTE. It didn't happen under Obama. It happened under Trump. I think he made a misstep there. And so, we'll see how that evolves. On this issue of China now saying, well, we'll buy more, stuff from you.
Yeah.
What they're really saying is, I talked to some of the trade reps yesterday over at the White House. They're saying, well, what they want to buy from us is our oil, which is fine, but that's not the thing that we want them to buy. We want them to buy our our high value-added products, which is not what they're proposing to do. Those are the kinds of things they have very high, high tariffs on. And one of the things to think about, this is a bit of a stretch, but just think about this. We were selling steel and, and other kinds of military, devices and so on to the Germans in the 1930s on the eve of World War II. And I wonder whether, we're going to be doing that with respect to China because their military is growing at an enormous pace, and they are saber rattling in the China South Sea. What happens if they invade Taiwan, or what if they move into India? And it's amazing that they're moving into all these islands all over the Asian region. I'm very worried about what's going on there, and we better wake up to the new China threat.
All right, he is Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, Heritage Foundation economist, and chief economist for CNN. Steve, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, have a great week. Take care.
You too.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.